Alex, and this is Ginger Head and Co, my sewing vlog, and today we're going to talk about measuring. I'm going to quickly show you how to measure yourself for either drafting your patterns or fitting patterns that you already have, commercial patterns. And this is going to be simplified before it gets more complicated. This is the rule of my life. Simplify before you complicate. I'm going to need some help. You are not going to need a tailor's dummy. You are not going to need a mannequin. You can measure yourself. But when I'm talking to you, it's probably easier to use somebody else, and I don't have anybody else to measure. Let's start with the lengths, okay? First of all, you need to know how tall you are. I'm going to use centimeters and meters because I think in centimeters and meters you can calculate it into inches. The first very important measurement is the nape of your neck to the waist. So the nape of your neck is this very sticky disc here. It's C7 vertebra if you are into sports or other things, or if you're a doctor. The nape of your neck to your waist is usually 1/4 of your height. It could be 1/10 of your height plus 4 centimeters times 2, which is much more complicated. So in general, for most humans, it is going to be a range between 38 and 42, 43 centimeters, okay? Just for reference, but measure that, okay? So for me, it's 38 centimeters. So we've got the nape of the neck to the waist, and now the armhole measurement, and it is quite important. It is going to be used quite a lot, and it should be as precise as possible. So the armhole line is here. When I put the ruler here, right, can you see that? And then use my measuring tape to measure that. This is your armhole depth, or your arm side line sometimes. And very often it is about 20 centimeters, or it is half of your neck to waist measurement that we've just taken. But it is definitely better to measure that. For patterns, usually some ease is added because you wouldn't be able to move your hand. So for me it's 17 centimeters. For most people it's 21 centimeters. For most sizes it is going to be about 20, 21, 22 centimeters, okay? It's important to measure it quite generously and quite precisely. The next measurement is going to be waist to hip measurement, waist to hip measurement. So from your waist to your hip. And there are two ways of measuring that. So we can measure the high hip, and it's usually about 17 to 20 for all sizes. Well, 16 to 20 for all sizes. But this is for design. So let's say that if you start flaring your skirts, you would use your high hip. But not all people, most women don't have high hip. That is their proper hip. So your hips are usually your fullest place, right? And your fullest place tends to be lower. For some women who have low hips, it is pretty much on their legs. It's important to measure that length as well, because if you don't add enough ease to your widest point, you are going to have problems. You are not going to look very attractive. And waist to hips is usually 20, 22 centimeters, but it's pretty normal to have it lower, don't worry. Everything is normal. But these, the lengths, are the things that we differ less than arm, and I don't have an arm here. So to measure the arm length, I'm going to use my arm, roughly. I'll show you how to do that. We measure the arm when the arm is slightly bent, so like that, okay? And you would probably need somebody else to do that, right? But you can also just use standards. Standard length of the arm, or length of the sleeve, would be 57 to 60 centimeters. Shorter for jersey, because jersey can stretch. These things are easy to modify, so you can shorten your sleeve. And it's probably best to start with a longer sleeve and then shorten it. And then, when we are making our dress, the only other measurement that we would need is the length of the dress, or the length of the top. So the length of the top, well, it tends to be about 60 centimeters, 58, 60 centimeters in industry, but it is determined by fashion, it is determined by the design of the top, and the dress length, well, it's up to you. If you are tall, it's probably going to be at least a meter, so 100 centimeters, even for shortish ones. It might be far longer. You just measure that, or you can measure your favorite dress and you know. And then let's treat it as a length, because it is a length. It goes that direction. Measure your shoulder, and measure your shoulder. Yeah, the hair is up because I'm in business. The shoulder is from here to this little bone here. See, when I do that, you can see the little hole. So from the beginning of your neck, so from here to where your arm starts. When you move your arm, that's the arm starting here. Okay, it is better to measure it as you move your arms. Okay, so measure I'm showing you my underwear. So measure that, right? And that should be exact because we need it for sleeves. But in the fashion industry, you would have the arm length as 12 centimeters, around 12 centimeters, between 11.5 and 12.5 for most people, whether you like it or not. It is already with some ease added. For Asia, it would be about 10 centimeters, so between 9.5 and 10.5 centimeters. That, with mine, is 7 centimeters. It doesn't fit the standard. Very often I make it longer. It doesn't always matter, but you don't have to fit the standards. And finally, remembering that we've got the low waist. So if you, like me, like wearing your skirts slightly under, it would be your low waist, 5 centimeters below your natural waist. You've got your waist, yeah, and you've got your low waist 5 centimeters lower. There are also some auxiliary measurements that we can take, and I'm going to show you, but you don't really have to worry too much about it. Very often when I talk about slopes, you don't really know what I'm talking about. So to measure the slope of your arm, so to measure how much difference there is between this point and this point, you do that. You measure from the waist to, well, the nape of the neck, but at the front you just have to guess it. From here to here, to the waist, okay? Here to the waist. Let's say that for me it is 38 centimeters, and then you measure from here to here, and let's say that for me it's 36 centimeters. So the 2 centimeters is going to be my slope, right? 2 centimeters down. Also, and you can do that the same at the back. Then you can also measure, and this is for the sleeves, so you can also measure across from the waist point through the bust to your shoulder line, to the end of the shoulder here, right? You measure that either from the waist, and in some books or in some methods it's only half of that, and let's say that it's 40 centimeters, right? So you would start your armhole here, 40 centimeters. It's useful for sleeves, and we can do the same at the back too. The back like that through the shoulder blade, and my mannequin doesn't have shoulder blades, I do, so we differ, right? So through that point, you know what a shoulder blade is. From the waist through the shoulder blade to the end of the arm. So let's say that it's 36 centimeters here. The lengths are quite similar. Also, when I talk about the balance of the front and back, what I mean is when you measure yourself through the bust point to your arm like that, you can see that this measurement is different than if you do the same at the back. So if you do the same from the waist point through the back, through the shoulder blade here, it is going to be shorter. So let's say that mine would be 40 at the front and 36 at the back. So in general, I would probably need about 2 centimeters balance, but balance is distributed. So I usually add 1 centimeter to the front, 1.5. It really depends. If you have darts, you don't really need that unless your bust is really substantially bigger than your waist and your hips perhaps, and then you can add up to 3 centimeters. It's never more than 3 centimeters, because what happens if you have more than 3 centimeters, you do need a dart. You're not going to do without a dart. And the dart takes over, so you don't really need to balance anything in most cases, or you only need 1 centimeter. You can also add it to the hem, so the front hem is going to be longer. And this is a good exercise when you're drafting patterns, so you can add something to the hem because you can always make it shorter. And you can see how it rises or how it doesn't rise on your body. You can always level the hem. And why it's not bigger than 3 centimeters? First of all, because usually you would use a dart, but also when you measure yourself, even through the bust, when you have a dress, when you measure yourself to the length of the dress through your nipple in the widest point, and then you do the same at the back, so you measure yourself, you have a bum here. So what is sort of gain at the front is going to be gained at the back by your bum. Also, shoulder blades. Some people have quite protruding shoulder blades. So the balance is never ever more than 3.5 centimeters for really big sizes. It should be sort of distributed evenly. So it's not like you add 7 centimeters here because something goes up at the front. This is a mistake. So don't do that. We can start the circumferences, I think. Right, so let's start from the top. You measure your neck, okay? And if it's less than 36 centimeters, you would still need to use 6 as 1/6 of your neck. So 36 is the smallest you can ever use for pattern making, for the simple reason that the head wouldn't get through. The hole that is smaller. We usually use 1/6 of that. So measure yourself quite generously here, not too generously, so don't put fingers there, but it is quite kind of loose, okay? So if it's less than 36 centimeters, it doesn't really happen that often, but my neck is less than that, it's 35. I still use 6 as 1/6 of that measurement. Then, bust measurement, and the full bust measurement is important for the fit. So you measure yourself in the widest point, and usually we know how much it is because we use it for various things, okay? So it's usually through the nipple in the fullest point, but the fullest point can't be lower. It doesn't have to be the nipple. Busts come in various shapes and sizes. Then hip measurement, so hip circumference, and very often in bust, waist, hip circumference, we use either half of it or 1/4 of it for drafting patterns. So your hip measurement should be taken on the widest point of your hip. If your hips are low, if you have them lower than your bum, that's absolutely fine. Measure there. Don't cheat. Nobody's looking. Don't cheat. Then your waist measurement. And what happens if some people like me don't really have a big difference between the waist and the hip? First of all, well, we have to measure that generously. Second of all, in pattern drafting, we very often add something to the waist, so you're going to be fine. Waist measurement, and the waist measurement is probably the most discussed one in the universe, how to take it. And I suppose you know the string method, so measure yourself like that. Put a string, usually with something holding it down, but it's not always necessary. Tie it around your waist, wear it all day, and the string or the piece of elastic, even better piece of elastic, is going to sit naturally on your waist. In pattern drafting, you don't always have to use your natural waist. Like, I'm not always using my natural waist because my natural waist is quite high, so it sometimes distorts the proportions, or my proportions are already distorted. So sometimes I use my low waist and pretend that this is my waist. But it's important to know where your waist is for many reasons. It's important because if you make something that needs a belt, for example, that's pretty obvious then. If your waist is higher, the belt will naturally go to your waist, and you will have a difference. If you have a seam here, the seam will be visible. Or if your waist is lower, it's going to happen in the other way. So your belt is going to show where your waist is, and the seam is going to be under the belt. So both cases are not really desirable in dressmaking. We've got the bust, the waist, and the hips measured. Then our bicep, or the top of the arm, and whereas our lengths don't vary that much, our widths vary enormously. So this is where you really measure yourself. you can measure your bicep, or the highest point. Is it tricep really? it's called bicep, so let's say I'm not going to argue. The top of the arm, and you measure it, first of all, generously. Second of all, like with everything else, in the position that you have your body. So moving your arm. This is particularly important if you make clothes for sports. So measure yourself in movement, right? Check if you're going to move your arm, right? Okay, so, well, as I said, it varies. It could be anywhere from 26 centimeters to 50 centimeters, and that's it. That's your measurement. It's fine. And the wrist also varies, and it could be from 14 to 30 centimeters, and there is nothing wrong with having your measurement. Do not apologize for your measurements. So yeah, yeah, I'm not going to apologize. Okay, so we've got our full bust, our waist, our hips, and full hips might be lower than your hip. And then we've got our bicep, or the top of the arm, measured, and we need to measure half of our chest. And we measure it, and I'm going to show you on me. We measure it from here to here, from here to here, where your armhole would start. Okay, so measure it over your bust, where your bust stops, so you can feel it, that it changes. We measure it for various reasons, but we also measure it if you desperately want to know your dart. Darts are easier when they're not calculated, but you can't calculate the dart. So the minimum dart that you would need is the difference between half of your full bust, or actually the full bust but measured only at the front. So let's say that for me it is, let's say that it's 50 centimeters because it's going to be easier for me to calculate. It's not, but okay, let's say that that's 50 centimeters, okay? And then you measure the same thing but higher, where your bust finishes, right? Just when it finishes here. And let's say that it is 36 centimeters, just for, so I would have 14 centimeters difference, okay? So the 14 centimeters that I've got should be divided into half, because I need 2 darts, right? So I've got 7 centimeters, and in theory this is around how much my dart width should be. And then if you want to draft your dart, you can use the 7 centimeters. 7 centimeters is a very rough calculation. So knowing that you need 7 centimeters here, you can just decide where your dart is, like that. That would be the middle of my dart, and then the same measurement should be used for one leg of the dart and the second leg of the dart. 7 centimeters between that. 7 centimeters is not my measurement. I use 6 centimeters for my dart, but this is, seriously, this is easier to do when you have standards, when you check the standards. So for the smallest sizes, size 6, kind of sporty figure, it would be 5.4 centimeters in width of the dart. For size 8 it would be about 6 centimeters, size 10 about 7 centimeters. It usually goes up to 9 centimeters, and then you start thinking about something else, because one dart is not enough, and if you have a very wide dart it doesn't always look very nice. So you think about distributing the bust differences somewhere else as well, and usually the bust increases with size, so there are also other things to take into consideration. But that was the easiest way to understand why sometimes we need the dart, because this is smaller than this. We need that, and we use that for, well, for various things, but we use that for sleeves, and it's important. It's important to measure it accurately. Then you do the same thing with the back. So you measure your back width, again, from the beginning of the arm to the beginning of the arm, the beginning of the arm, the beginning of the arm, okay? Because you will need it for drafting your sleeves and armholes. And also, a thing that is quite important, and I'm not sure if I'm going to show you here, and it is pretty standard in women. When you find the highest point of your bust, I'm going to talk about the bust point, and the bust point is measured like that. So you measure, usually it's between your nipple and another nipple, So you measure that, you divide it by half, right? And the half that you've got, let's say 9 centimeters, so 18 altogether, right? 18 altogether for me, half of that is 9 centimeters, and the 9 centimeters is going to be put on our pattern from the center front. How do we know where from the top? We know because we can measure that. So measure from your shoulder to your nipple, let's say, and you've got your bust point. So from my shoulder to my nipple, and this is probably not going to be precise, but okay, let's say that this is 19 centimeters. So 19 centimeters from my shoulder seam down, but 9 centimeters from the center front of my pattern to my bust point, and I've got it, right? Easy. And I'm going to stop here because there are other measurements that are sometimes helpful but mostly not. And when I started pattern drafting and I was told to measure a lot of things in a lot of ways, it was definitely helpful, but it discouraged me because there was too much trigonometry, because there is too much calculation. It doesn't have to be. It can be much, much, much simpler, and it works. Don't forget to like the video if you like the video. It's a lot of hard work, so I would appreciate all the likes. And if you want to know anything, or if you want to tell me something, or if you have any tricks that make pattern drafting easier, put that in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon. Bye.